Chainsaw Man has a ton of interesting characters, but the one that seems to have piqued the community's interest the most in part 2 is Hirofumi Yoshida. He's a pretty funky guy, so today we're going to dive into his character to see if we can figure out what his role is in the story. So let's get right into it. Yoshida is first introduced to us as a private devil hunter hired by Makima to protect Denji during the International Assassins arc. Right off the bat, Yoshida gives off some weird vibes. Not good or bad, just mysterious, mischievous vibes. He immediately dispatches one of the immortal brothers, and later on even goes toe-to-toe with Kwanzi, managing to hold his own for a relatively long amount of time. While he does end up losing, he uses his devil, the Octopus Devil, to break his fall, which is a little bit weird for a devil contract, but we'll touch on that more in a little bit. Yoshida makes use of the Octopus Devil, and we've seen him use it for an ink attack, as well as attacking with the tentacles directly. After the International Assassins arc, he has finals, and we do not see Yoshida again until part 2, but when we do, he starts to play a much bigger role. We first see him when he asks Asa if she needs to go to the nurse's office. After Yoru takes over her body, he makes a remark about her scars, which is pretty unusual because no one else who has seen Yoru has made a remark about them. He then gets assigned to the same devil hunting group as Asa, and then has lunch with Denji. Turns out they're going to the same school. Denji accuses Yoshida of stalking him, which is an important detail we'll dive back into later. He then talks about his organization and how they want to protect Chainsaw Man's identity, but Denji says he wants people to know he's Chainsaw Man for the ladies. Yoshida does not have a response to this, because, well, how do you respond to that? They meet up again at the school where Denji accuses Yoshida of stalking him again. Yoshida says he's willing to stop Denji by force. While this could be an empty threat, based on what we know about Yoshida, it most likely isn't, and for some reason he believes he could beat Denji if needed. I don't know who I'd put my money on in this fight, but I hope we get to see it someday. Yoshida then attempts to help Denji get a girlfriend by introducing him to someone who is desperate for a boyfriend, which is Asa. They talk, and it takes like 3 minutes for Denji to expose himself as Chainsaw Man. It does not work. Denji then tries to do the same thing a few chapters later during a devil attack, but Yoshida quickly removes him from this situation, reminding him that he will use force if necessary. A few chapters later, we're introduced to the Famine Devil, and Yoshida appears again after Denji and Asa get trapped by the Eternity Devil. He then has a conversation with Denji and asks if Denji thinks Chainsaw Man would eat the Death Devil. Much like the stalking comments, we'll be retouching on this in a little bit. After they get out, Yoshida uses Octopus, and then he seems to gain Famine's interest, and that's pretty much all we know about Yoshida as of now. So now that we've recapped who Yoshida is, what is he doing, and what is his role in the story, the most popular theory right now is that Yoshida is actually the Death Devil, one of the 4 horsemen devils. This stems from a multitude of symbolism between the two. For starters, the name Yoshida can be rearranged to Shidayo, which means I am death or it's death in Japanese. There's also this series of panels where Yoshida's hand signals translate to die or death. As we stated earlier, he's also brought up the Death Devil to Denji in conversation, and it seemed kind of out of nowhere. Yoshida also says he's at peace with death. While this makes sense for a devil hunter considering the mortality rate of the field, it's also interesting to think that maybe the Death Devil could be suicidal. I mean, there's nothing more deathy than wanting to die. On top of this, there's also the stalking remarks. As we already mentioned, Denji tells Yoshida to stop stalking him multiple times. On this own, it makes sense as Yoshida is being a bit creepy, but there is a line from the Doll Devil that I want to point out. Can you imagine living your life constantly stalked by death? Some fans have pointed out this line and drawn a connection to Yoshida's stalking of Denji. Personally, I think this is a bit of a stretch as it was just a small offhand comment from a devil that was spewing this kind of rhetoric for like 3 chapters. But knowing Fujimoto, it could be intentional. Personally, I'm not 100% convinced of this theory, but I don't think ruling it out is completely fair either. Part 2 does introduce 2 other horsemen, so it would make sense for the last one to play a larger role as well. Plus, he does feel pretty suspicious overall. The next theory is the Ocean Devil theory, but before we get into that, please consider subscribing. Over 90% of my viewers are not subscribed. That means that if you're watching this right now, there's a huge chance that you are not subscribed. Even just a 10% increase could make a huge difference for this channel. Plus, you really have no reason not to because YouTube is going to show you the content that you want to see anyway. So, Ocean Devil. Personally, I'm a much bigger fan of this theory because it's just a little bit more off the beaten track. This theory basically states that Yoshida is a devil relating to the Ocean Devil or the Ocean Devil himself. It mostly originates from his relationship with the Octopus Devil. The Octopus Devil is the only devil we've seen Yoshida use, and he uses him pretty liberally and casually. He has even used the Octopus Devil as a seat, which is not something most devil hunters would ever do with their contracted devils. He's also been seen using it very often and with no apparent repercussions. While there are other devils that don't have apparent repercussions, they are few and far between, like Aki in Future. It is possible that this is an agreement similar to Aki in the Fox Devil, where he traded some body parts for the power. But this contract with the Octopus Devil just feels different than a regular contract. I think it's because of how much control Yoshida feels like he has over the Octopus Devil. Like, most devil contracts feel like contracts, but in this case it feels like Yoshida is just in control. I don't think we've ever seen a devil submit to a human outright, but we have seen a devil submit to another devil. We saw it with the Bomb Devil and Typhoon, as well as Doll and Curse, and Stone and Darkness. I think. It's kinda hard to tell what happened here, but it does seem like Darkness made the Stone Devil submit to him. Obviously, we saw a ton of devils submit to Makima as well, but that's kind of a special case. It would technically be possible for the Octopus Devil to be submitting to the Death Devil, but I don't really see any connection between the fear of octopi and the fear of death, like there is between the fear of octopi and the fear of the ocean. Some other theories that I've seen are that Yoshida is the Octopus Devil or the Death Fiend. I don't think it's likely he's the Octopus Devil, because I don't think the fear of octopi is strong enough to render a human body. I also don't think he's the Octopus Fiend, because I don't think an Octopus Fiend would be as intelligent as Yoshida, especially considering what we saw of the Shark Fiend. This is kind of the same reason that I think the Death Fiend is unlikely. Most of the fiends we saw lacked the intelligence and the nuance that Yoshida has. The only real exceptions were Angel, Violence, and that one of Kwanzi's whose name I can't recall. But even then, they all had very visible characteristics that made it obvious which fiends they were. I also just want to point out that there doesn't seem to be any real connection between the strength of a devil and the competence of its fiend, as some of the fiends created by some of the more powerful devils were less competent than weaker devils, meaning there's no guarantee that a death fiend would be super high functioning. On top of this, most fiends have a strong resemblance to the devils they are based on, and I don't know if we can say that for Yoshida and Death. For the record, I don't think Yoshida being a fiend is impossible, but it doesn't seem very likely at this point either. The very last option is the most boring, that being that Yoshida is not a devil or a fiend of any kind, and instead he's just a mysterious, dubious guy. If we're being honest, this is probably the most likely result. I wouldn't be a huge fan of this just because it's the most boring option, but that doesn't mean that Yoshida can't be an interesting character as a human. There are quite a few interesting human characters in part 1, and so far in part 2 it feels like almost everyone has been a devil of some sort. So if Yoshida was a human, it would help balance the scales a little bit. Yoshida is definitely one of the most intriguing characters in part 2, and I'm really excited to see what he does. Whether he's a devil, or a human, or something else entirely, I'm sure he's going to make things as interesting as he is. Thank you all for watching this video. As I said earlier, please try to make sure you are subscribed, and if you are, let me know what you thought of this video in the comments down below. It's the best way to let me know what you think of the content I'm making. And if you did enjoy watching this video, please consider watching another, as watching videos back to back is the best way to support this channel. Thank you again, and I'll see you next week.